I'm going to start this morning with some statistics on divorce. Every year, over 900,000 couples divorce in the United States. It's about 2,500 a day. That's about one in every 30 seconds. 43% of first marriages end in divorce. The average duration of a marriage before divorce is 8 years. Average age of people going through divorce is 46 years old. 69% of divorces are initiated by women. The average cost of a divorce is $19,458 per couple. What are some of the top reasons for divorce? Lack of commitment, infidelity, conflict, irreconcilable differences. 66% of men think their spouse should have worked harder to save the marriage, and 74% of women think their spouse should have worked harder to save the marriage. What is the most common reason people say they get married? It is because of love. A couple things before we get started. I'm not making fun of divorce. I'm not making light of it. I know that we have people here who have gone through it, and it's not easy. It is tough. But today, as we continue our series called Heart Attack, we're going to talk about ways that we can protect our marriage, all right? And I know some of you are like, well, I'm not married, I'm not planning on getting married, or I'm engaged. Hey, whatever we're going to talk about today, I really truly feel whether you're married or thinking about marriage or you're engaged, it will help you as you get towards that moment in your life. And if you're in the midst of it, what we're going to talk about today, I think can be very helpful in your marriage. Now, 4 years ago, I did pretty much this exact same message. So about 65% of you are brand new, so you don't remember this. The other people didn't take notes, so they're going to forget, okay? But this was really good because I've had people come up to me even recently like, hey, I remember that message from 4 years, and it really helped me. So I hope this will be helpful to all of us. Here's the deal, right? Here's kind of our theme for the day. Marriage is all about posture. I want you to think about postures for a second. We learn a lot about people based on their postures. Like, we can tell when people are afraid because of their posture. We can tell when they're happy and excited. We can tell when they're sad. We can tell when they're cocky. I can stand up here on a Sunday morning and I can look at you and I can tell whether you're paying attention or not based on your posture, right? Like, we can tell a lot about the postures that people have. And we can tell a lot about a marriage and whether it's healthy or not based on the posture of a couple. And so this morning I have these two friends up here with me who I'm going to use as a visual element to help us understand these different postures. There's three postures in marriage, and your marriage probably falls into one of these three categories. And again, if you're married, I'm hoping this has strengthened your marriage moving forward. But the very first marriage posture we have is this one. This is where you are back to back with your spouse. This is not where you want to be, okay? Just go ahead and say that. And this is where you are enemies with your spouse. That your home is a battlefield. And your words and actions towards your spouse are the weapons that you use. And that every single day there is this new battle that arises. Now, there's all kinds of issues with this particular posture. There's trust issues that are there. For some, criticism is like the love language that you share between each other in this kind of marriage. There's always this constant reminder of the past. Even if the past was decades ago, that something will happen and somebody would bring up the past. And so there are these hurts that are still there from the past. There are wounds that are never allowed to heal. The gifts of grace and mercy and forgiveness are just not a part of a back-to-back relationship. And it's because these battles are always there. So how do we handle this? When we are back-to-back in this marriage posture with each other, what do? Well, we play the blame game. Never my fault. It's always yours. And so we fight in that way. It's always your fault. You're the reason our finances are a mess. You're the reason the kids are the way they are. You're the reason I don't love you anymore. And so we play this blame game with our spouse. It's always your fault. It's never mine. But how do we oftentimes express this blame? Look at Proverbs chapter 30, verse 33. As the beating of cream yields butter and striking the nose causes bleeding, so stirring up anger causes quarrels. I love this passage because I'm trying to figure out how does this guy or this writer go from churning butter to fights, right? It's like this pretty big progression. So be careful when you're churning butter this week. That's, I think, we're supposed to learn here. But it's right, isn't it? I mean, if you think about what was written here, it's so true. When we are in constant battles with our spouse, the way we often express it is through our anger. And that anger can be verbal. Again, we use words as a weapon. It can be physical through the actions that we take. A lot of times we bring fear with our actions, or we bring control or trying to control the other person. And so anger becomes a part of this blame game. And where does all this come from? I would say that probably the number one reason there's this anger within this relationship, there's this back-to-back relationship, is because of a lack of communication. When issues arise, we don't talk about it. When something difficult comes around, we don't deal with it. When we have disagreements, what we'll do is we'll just kind of let it stew inside. In fact, a lot of times what we'll do, something that starts out kind of small, and we just ignore it and don't deal with it, over time begins to build up and it gets bigger and bigger. And at some point, it's going to explode. You got to let that pressure out, and it comes out in anger. It comes out in this blame game. We're at this place because of you and not because of me. And so healthy communication is so important within a marriage. For some of you, this is your relationship, right? That you are living in this back-to-back marriage posture. And the words that are spoken are meant to be hurtful. The actions that are taken are meant to be calculated. And what's missing? I think it's pretty simple. It's love. It's funny, we talked about love last week, and there's an incredible passage about love that I'm going to reread again from 1 Corinthians 13. Paul says, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails." Now, I could do like I did last week and take each one of those and talk through them, and that would be a great way to talk through what we're talking about this morning. But I'm not going to do that. In fact, if you go back and you listen to last week's message, if you missed it, I think a lot of those elements of love that we talked about in regards to dating actually are true for marriage too. But I want to reiterate that one word there. Paul uses this word love, right? And I said last week that word love that he uses is the Greek word agape. And I said that word means this unconditional, sacrificial love. Joel, the first week of the series, he was introducing the series, and he actually used a definition from Tim and Kathy Keller in their book, The Meaning of Marriage. He said, sacrificial commitment to the good of the other. So marriage isn't asking, what can I get from you, okay? It's not, what can I get from you? What can you give to me? Marriage is all about, what can I give to you? What am I willing to give up for my spouse? And when we are back to back in a marriage, we're not given a whole lot. The things we're given are the things we shouldn't be given. And yet what we should be given is this incredible sacrificial love towards our spouse. Now, I'm going to give you some ways that I think we can work on this, but I want to go ahead and hit the other postures first and then come back and then give us some next steps, all right? So this is our first one. Sometimes our marriages are back to back, and maybe you're in the midst of that right now. Other times, or some of you are going to find that your marriage right now is shoulder to shoulder. And I'm going to be honest, I think in our world today, especially here in America, I think this is where many marriages are. This is where you and your spouse are best friends. You're besties, right? You're BFFs. People see your marriage from the outside and are like, man, they get along so well. They look like they have this incredible partnership, and they're a GTD couple. They get things done all the time, and they're accomplishing things, and they can just seem like they've got the world conquered, and they run by each other, and they're giving each other high fives. And I think this is where a lot of marriages are right now. And you're saying, aren't we supposed to be best friends? The answer is yes. Proverbs 27:9. The sweet smell of incense can make you feel good, but true friendship is better still. Yeah, you should be close friends with your spouse, right? You should know what they like and what they don't like. You should know their favorite restaurants. You should know their favorite movies. You should know their anniversary that you guys share together. It's an important thing. Mine is etched inside of my ring, and plus we've got 2 birthdays on the same day, so that helps me a whole lot. You should know their birthdays. You should know special occasions. I mean, these are all things that best friends do. However, I think that sometimes we can kind of get stuck. And we get stuck in this particular relationship for a couple of reasons that I think are common. One are those little people that run around some of our houses called kids. If you've got small children or you've had small children, there's a lot of shoulder to shoulder that happens within your marriage. I mean, kids are good. We've got 3. I love our kids. But I think sometimes kids have become the priority number 1 for marriages. In fact, parents, I would invite you to look at your calendar. If you looked at your calendar and you saw where you spent your time and you have kids, I bet a lot of it is for your kids, right? There's their sports that they're doing, there's activities they're involved with, there's school functions that are going on. I mean, the list could go on and on and on. And so often that free time that maybe you could have, you've given it over to your kids. I'm not saying that's a bad thing in some ways, but my fear is that for some couples, kids have become priority number 1 over the marriage. For others, it's work, right? Especially now, things have changed a little bit. Many of you had to go back into the office, and so you're trying to scramble and figure out things for work, and you commute, and then you come home, and just in the normal day-to-day of life, you've got your job, and you come home, and there's more work to do when you get home. That brings more challenges also. If you were to look at your calendar right now, if you have kids and you have work, there's probably very little space to have free time with your spouse. That really what you're doing is you're living in this shoulder-to-shoulder marriage. You are teammates. You are co-workers. And yet in this, there's still something that is missing. That we're still not doing everything we can to strengthen this marriage. And maybe for some of you, you feel fine being in this place. Maybe for some of you, you like being shoulder to shoulder. Maybe for some of you, that's the place that you want to be. What happens when your kids move on? When they leave the house? What are you left with? Are you just still going to be shoulder to shoulder at that point? Or what happens when you retire and you're done with that job? Are you going to be happy with the marriage that is left because you spent very little time strengthening it in the midst of work, in the midst of kids? I think what we find oftentimes is that marriage never really existed. You worked together, you were co-workers and teammates, but you were still missing one aspect of that relationship. Which leads us to this third posture of marriage, and it is being face to face. I'm sure you've been to a wedding before, and if you go to a wedding at the very beginning, bride and groom will come up and they'll be standing shoulder to shoulder, and it's almost like this reminder, like, hey, these people are friends. But what does the officiant do at some point? He or she, they'll tell them to turn and face each other, won't they? Say, hey, face each other, look at each other, and it's in this moment that we are reminded that marriage is all about intimacy. Now, you hear the word intimacy, and most of you go to middle school and you think sex, right? That's just kind of how our minds often do, but intimacy and sex are different things. I shouldn't say that way. Intimacy is more than just this act of sex. Let me explain. Genesis 4:1. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Oftentimes we see that word "new" in Scripture, and we think that it means this act of sex. But the word that's actually used here, the Hebrew word for new, is the word yada. Yada means perceiving, learning, understanding, experiencing. And so that word yada is not this action that we take when we have this marital relationship. It's about something much deeper than that. It's a deeper bond. It's a deeper relationship that we have with our spouse. And so that word yada actually represents very well our word intimacy. And intimacy is when we truly know our spouse. Well, what does that intimacy look like? Joel, the very first week, he was talking about the word love in Hebrew, and the word love in Hebrew is this word ahava, and it means to give, right? The love's not how much can I take from you, how much can you give me? It's all about how much can I give you. That's what ahava asks. What can I give you? How much can I give to this relationship? How much can I give to this marriage? And so it means to give. But here's this interesting position here of this word. We have this word ahava that means to give. And then in the New Testament, we read this in a second, Paul uses this word agape, which means this sacrificial, unconditional love, right? Actually, that Greek word agape was derived from that Hebrew word for love, ahava. And so we got to put these two together. Then our goal in marriage should be this intimacy with our spouse. We should get to this place where we fully know our spouse, right? There's this intimate connection there. And in knowing them, we love them unconditionally. We love them sacrificially. And why? Because we're fully giving ourselves over to our spouse. And so in the end, this face-to-face posture, this is what we should strive for when it comes to marriage. Now, as we kind of look back at what we've talked about here, as we look back at this back-to-back posture, and you may be in this place right now, I'm just going to be honest. If you're not working on this diligently, you're probably heading for divorce, okay? And if you're in this shoulder-to-shoulder relationship and you have this posture within your relationship, you're heading for divorce. It may not be legally, but I think relationally, you're going to find that's where you're heading. But in the end, this is the place we want to be. We want to be in this place where there's this intimate connection with our spouse, where we know our spouse and we love our spouse and we're giving to our spouse and not asking, what can you give me? But I'm going to give to you, and I'm going to do this sacrificially, and I'm going to love you unconditionally. Like, this is the place that we want to be, face to face. And I can say that from up here, and words are easy, right? It's actually knowing that marriage is hard. Wouldn't it have been great before you got married? Somebody's like, hey, marriage is actually really hard. Like, it takes time and effort and work and time and effort and work and time and effort and work. I mean, it is hard. Marriage is tough, but it can be incredible and beautiful if we can take some steps to get us to this place. And so what I'm going to do for the rest of my time with you, I want to share with you a few steps that I believe are so important to strengthening our marriages. First thing I would say is put Jesus first. I know you might be like, well, we're in the church, you're supposed to say that. Yep, true, but it is so important. Here's why I would say that. There's this rumor that has been spread for many years that Christians divorce at the same rate as non-Christians, about 50%. In his book called Christians Are Hate-Filled Hypocrites and Other Lies You Have Been Told, Bradley Wright, who's a professor of sociology at the University of Connecticut, he looked at this and he's like, something doesn't seem quite right here. Here's people who say they follow Jesus, and yet they divorce at the same rate as everybody else. Something's got to be off. So he did a little bit of research, and he found that when they asked the question, like, are you divorced? And people say yes. Are you a Christian? People will say yes. That doesn't mean that someone's actually following Jesus. Like, they may have been in church 25 years ago and never read their Bible, never pray, never do anything, and yet they'll still say, hey, I'm a Christian. So he dove into this data a little bit deeper, and what he found was that as he began to look at people who were actually fully following Jesus, okay, people who were attending church on a regular basis, people that were reading their Bible every day, people that were praying every day, people that were in community together and serving together within the church, what he found was that the divorce rate for people who were living out their faith wasn't 50%. It was actually 15%. That's much different than what we have been told. But why is this number so low? I think it's pretty simple, right? Jesus is first. That Jesus is the priority of an individual within that marriage, but Jesus is also the priority within that marriage. And when we spend our time focused on Jesus, it affects our souls, our hearts, our our minds, our words, our actions. Like, we're changed and transformed by Jesus, which then does what? It changes and transforms this marriage that we are in. And so it was so important that we put Jesus first. And maybe you're here this morning and that's something you've never done, but you're getting ready to get married, or maybe your marriage is struggling. And one of the things we invite people to do is to take that step of baptism. It's one of the most important steps we can take when it comes to our relationship on our spiritual journey with Jesus. This morning, between services, we had Maritza and Terry. They were baptized today, and we got a chance to celebrate with that, which was so incredible. But man, we'd love to see more people take that step. That maybe that's the step you need. A couple weeks, Joel's actually going to be doing a baptism class during our third service, and so we'd love for you to sign up for that. You can do that through the app or QR code. Or if you're like, man, we want to be baptized, or I want to be baptized, let us know. Again, you can do that through our app or QR code. The point is this: put Jesus first. So important in our relationships. Second thing, recognize your spouse is not your enemy. Maybe at some point in time, somebody that you knew was a close friend, like, hey, your spouse is your enemy, and you've kind of just accepted that. Maybe let that go, okay? Because the truth is, your spouse is not your enemy. There's a reason there is fighting in your relationship. There's a reason there is tension within your relationship. And oftentimes it is this lack of communication. But it could also be jealousy or possessiveness or overdependency. It could be neglect. It could be rejection, selfishness. Or here's the good one. When you got married, you brought all these expectations into your marriage. And when you got married, your spouse brought all these expectations into your marriage. And over the course of your marriage, you've never talked about those expectations, right? And so when your expectations are different than their expectations and you don't talk about it, guess what? It's going to bring friction and tension within a marriage. This is why so often fights break out. But here's the deal. Your spouse is not your enemy. Your enemy are those things that you are struggling with within your marriage. Recognize what the enemy truly is. And start to work on that. How do you do that? Let's go to the next one. Go to counseling. I just shared with you some of the reasons that we struggle in marriage, but a good counselor will help you walk and address those problem areas. For why communication is lacking, for why you respond and act the way you do, for why you don't deal with whatever those tensions may be within your relationship. And I will let you know that spending money on a counselor is some of the best money you will spend in your life. Someone once put it this way. They said you have a choice. You can either choose to spend money on counseling or choose to spend money on a divorce. You get to choose. Which one would you rather choose? Counseling or divorce? Now, I say all of that, and I've been very open about this. I go to counseling every 2 weeks, and I do it because I know I need it. I want to be a better dad, and I want to be a better husband, a better pastor, a better person, and so I go to counseling every couple of weeks. Kara and I right now are in the midst of one of our marriage checkups. We do this every couple of years. Man, when you've been married for a little bit, over a couple of years, you're like, all right, there's some things we probably need to work on, and so this was me this time. I was like, hey, I think we should go get a little bit of marriage counseling because we need a checkup. She was like, I can't believe you said that. And point for me, right? But it's important in a relationship to have that. And so, we're going through that. It's going really well. But for you, we have this unique relationship. We've talked about this partnership before with Safe Harbor Christian Counseling. We work closely with them. We love connecting you with them. And man, if your marriage, hear me out. Even if your marriage isn't struggling, if things are good, like this is for Kara and I, like this marriage checkup is so beneficial to make sure that those things that can be tension points are out in the open. And so I hope you'll take the time to sign up to do that. You can email us, office@thejourneynova.org, if you'd like more information. Actually, if you go to our app, there's a button there. You can click on it. There's a form to fill out. Let me just tell you this. Do not go to Safe Harbor Christian Counseling and contact them. I could do a whole series on why that's not a good idea, but I'm not going to do that. Incredible organization. We love working with them, but it's easier if we get you connected with them. So you can hit us up through that form and let us know. Let me also add this. If your spouse like, no, I don't want to go to counseling, you know what you say? Hey, that's fine. I'm going to go. You fix you. You work on you. And you never know what your spouse may do. In fact, here's how I kind of put it. If you're married, go to counseling, okay? If you've been married for decades, go to counseling. If you're engaged, go to counseling. If you're thinking about getting married, go to counseling. If you're single and you don't ever want to be married your whole life, go to counseling, right? Counseling is good for everybody. Just take the time to do that. The other thing I would add into this, we set aside money in our budget every year for counseling because we don't want you to say, man, I really need counseling, but I can't afford it. Well, you can because we will help pay for it if you need that help, okay? But you can help us or let us know through signing up on that form. The next thing I would say after getting counseling is get intimate. Here we go. Once again, intimacy does not equal sex, but we need to work on intimacy and what that looks like within our marriage. Peter Scazzaro wrote a book called The Emotionally Healthy Leader. And it's an interesting book because he's talking about how to be a healthy leader, an emotionally healthy leader. But in it, there's this one section about marriage. And it's kind of weird that he puts it in there. It's like, hey, if your marriage is on the rocks, your marriage isn't strong, then it's going to affect your ability to lead. And so I took these three pieces to this intimacy piece that he shares, and I'm going to share those with you right now. Here's the first thing he says. He says, pray for greater intimacy in your marriage. Okay, hear me out. This is not praying for better sex in your marriage. This is about inviting the Holy Spirit to be present in your marriage. And maybe one of the greatest things we can do to garner intimacy within our marriage is to have the Holy Spirit fully engaged within this relationship that we have. And when we're praying for this, man, it's helping us to become more passionate and more intimate toward our spouse. I'm going to give you a little challenge. There's no sign up for this. We don't need to know. But I'm going to invite you, if you're married, that over the next 7 days, every single day, over the next 7 days, that you pray with your spouse. And I know if right now we're like, hey, how many of you pray with your spouse every day? I'm guessing very few hands would go up. Because I know we're struggling with it, right? We got kids, we got work, we got life, we get busy, and by the time we're done, we just want to go to sleep. Just spend a moment praying with your spouse. 7-day challenge from now till next Sunday. I'm not going to ask if you did it, but I truly believe it will influence your relationship. Maybe you're like, well, my spouse doesn't believe in Jesus. My spouse is a Christian. I've done this before, and I've had spouses that have gone to their husband, their wife, and said, hey, I know you don't believe. Would you just give me a second just to pray for our marriage? And their spouse has been like, sure. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be like, hey, God, let your spirit be in this marriage. Hey, God, strengthen us. Let's be more intimate. Whatever it may be, amen, and be done. But I'm going to challenge you with that 7-day challenge. Pray for greater intimacy in your marriage. Second thing that we talk about when it's about getting intimate, make intimacy a spiritual practice. I'm going to share what Scazzaro and his wife do for this spiritual practice. They swear by it. I'm just going to go ahead and give you permission. Let your inner middle schooler come out, okay, in this moment. He says for 20 minutes a day, every day, he and his wife fully derobe, naked in front of each other, they face each other, and they hold each other, okay? All right, let your middle schooler out right now, because that's different. We read this as a staff. That was wonderful at that moment. Here's what he says in his book. He says, our goal is not sexual intercourse. We simply want to be passionately connected to one another, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually. Maybe for some of us, this is the place we need to be. We need to be naked in front of our spouse. Now, I say that, and I don't mean if you want to do the full thing, that's great. But if you want to keep your clothes on, go for it. I think that's wonderful too. The point is being vulnerable, right? When you're here, you're not vulnerable at all. When you're here, you're not actually vulnerable either. When you're eye to eye, face to face, body to body, man, you are in this moment where you're looking at each other and you see each other fully. And I believe this is the place that we are called to be. And maybe we get naked, whatever way that may be for us, and we see each other face to face. We are intimately connected as we look and stare at each other. And again, he calls this a spiritual practice, and you're not going to find this probably in any spiritual practice list if you go take some tests. But I think the point here is you're vulnerable, but you're bringing God into this, right? There's this prayer that's happening. You're praying together. You're spending this time intimately together. But then he adds this third piece to this: intentionally affirm one another. I think part of the struggle we have with marriages is we like to seek out the flaws. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you. I'm going to tell you what you need to work on. And we criticize each other. And so again, here's Casaro says, hey, we stand there 20 minutes together. You know what we do? We affirm each other. We affirm each other and who that person is and what it is that we love about the other person. Affirmation is powerful. Voltaire once said, the ear is the avenue to the heart. I've shared before that data shows or research shows that about 77% of what we think of every single day is negative. And I bet if we kind of watched what we say to other people, probably not too far off of that 77% number of the words that come out of our mouth that we say negative things about and towards other people. So when it comes to our marriages, what if we spent our time not being negative, not trying to tear the other person down, but we work to build the other person up. We work to affirm who they are. Hey, this is what I like about you. This is what I love about you. This is what I appreciate about you. And maybe that's what we need on a daily basis, just a few moments to sit or stand or hold each other in front of each other and just say, man, this is who you are to me. It's so important that we find ways to be intimate in our marriage. And I truly believe if we take the time to do that, it can bring healing, it can bring love, and it can bring true intimacy to it. Wherever you may be, whatever posture you may have, if you're back to back, you got some work to do, I know. And it's hard work. And it might be painful work, and it might take a long time, but is your marriage worth it? For others, we may be in this shoulder-to-shoulder relationship, and we're good friends. And again, there's nothing wrong with being best friends with your spouse. I think that is part of marriage. But at the same time, there's this something that's just missing. And it still takes time and effort to get to that place of where we are intimate with each other. How do we get there? Well, for some of us, again, with back-to-back, I think there's a lot of counseling that needs to go into that. If you're shoulder to shoulder, it's making time for your spouse. Put the kids to bed, you Netflix and chill, whatever it is that you like to do in the evenings, or you put your laptop away. And I know you got an email to send out tomorrow about the 5 things that you did today, but what I want you to do is put your laptop away and just spend some time with your spouse. Just like, hey, my work can hold off because someday my work's going to be gone, but you're still going to be here. And I want this relationship to be strong. If you're face to face, you still got work to do, right? It's still hard. But you're in this place where you fully know and love each other. I love this quote, going back to that Keller book, The Meaning of Marriage. To be loved but not known is comforting, but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved as well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense. It humbles us out of our self-righteousness and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. This is what intimacy looks like. This is the place that we want to be. We want to be at this place where we know that God fully loves us, and that's what we want in our relationship, right? We want to know that we are known and fully loved by our spouse. So my prayer today is if you are married, no matter where you may be in this posture of marriage, that you're continuing to work to find this true intimacy, this true love in that relationship. And may God strengthen your marriage wherever you may be. And if you're thinking about marriage, planning on a marriage for the future, I hope something today will help you get kickstarted in the right direction as you let God lead you forward. Fight for your marriage. Fight for love. Fight for intimacy. Fight for being in this posture with your spouse. And as I think about that this morning, and I go back to those words by Tim and Kathy Keller, but to be fully known and truly loved as well, a lot like being loved by God. Every week here at the Journey, when we come together, we take communion as a church body. And when we do that, it is this reminder to us that we are loved by God, that God knows you and me fully. And God wants the best for us in this life. And God wants the best for our marriages. But maybe today we need to be taken back to Jesus and put Jesus first.